Dina Talley is live in Japan with more. What is the latest, Dominic?
Well, Lauren, they're going to dump some 11,500 tons of radioactive water into the ocean. The government is saying this is 100 times above the legal limit, but by its standards, it says, quote, it's deemed relatively low. It's going to have to do this because there are larger pools of much more highly contaminated radioactive water building up that the government just can't freely pump into the ocean, at least just yet, until it completely runs out of room. So that's what they're going to do, is they're going to get, it's sort of better the devil you know, really, get rid of the lesser water and then fill up these collection pits with the highly contaminated water that are coming off from all the runoff of all the hoses and the water they've been pouring on the 4 reactors that are overheating. Remember, they've got to keep those fuel rods very cool, otherwise they will go into full meltdown, and that will be a catastrophe on beyond a scale that we've seen at a nuclear plant in the history of nuclear power. Much worse than Chernobyl is what the experts saying if all 4 go into critical meltdown. So they had a facility that was designed to contain and also treat a lot of this radioactive water, but unfortunately that's become full, and as a result that water now has to be pumped out, and they will replace the water in it with the highly radioactive water that's coming off reactor number 2, which has been one of the 2 most troublesome reactors of all. That's where they believe that either there has been a partial meltdown, or if not, damage to the fuel rods, which could give off further heavy amounts of radiation going forward. The government has been speaking to the media, the top government spokesman saying this strategy does carry immense risk. This is what he had to say.
If this situation continues for a long time, the issue of accumulated radiation contamination will increase. Even if the sea does disperse the radiation, it will become a bigger problem, so we need to stop this from spreading out to sea as quickly as possible.
And you know, it does appear to be becoming a bigger problem, because we've heard further down the coast, down the south shoreline this time, that we are hearing of higher levels of radiation, and the government is saying, well, it looks like small fish will actually be absorbing this, but the problem is that when the bigger fish come along and start eating them, and those are the kind of fish that end up much further down the coastline towards Tokyo, that ends up getting into the food chain, and people could become sick as a result of that. But they're saying that's going to be some weeks or perhaps months down the line, but it is very much a real risk. Effectively, the government admitting that it really can't contain the problem at the moment.
Dominic, it sounds like things have actually gotten steadily worse, but is that an accurate assessment, or have things sort of remained the same as they were, or have they gotten even slightly better?
Incrementally, it's getting worse. Now, the levels they keep talking about of radiation leaking, sometimes as much as 10,000 times, they've said, as at one point above legal limits, does sound very alarming. They still say that these levels are within limits that would not be immediately damaging to large numbers of people. It's a localized problem, particularly at the Fukushima plant and the workers there. But, you know, that's not really doing much to actually gain public confidence, especially when they still haven't come up with any plan on a long-term solution to the situation. Right now, they don't know precisely what's going on inside those reactor cores, at reactors 1, 2, 3 and 4. 5 and 6 have been taken offline. They seem to be stable. But these other 4, there are critical problems there, but the extent of the risk is not known, and the government doesn't appear able to quantify, nor can TEPCO, the utility that operates it. You've got the IAEA, the UN nuclear watchdog over here, that isn't getting a full flow of information from the Japanese authorities, so can't make a full assessment. Now, we did have the US Energy Secretary, I believe, or the US Energy Department, saying that they believe that there was a 33% partial meltdown in reactor number 2, and in reactor number 1 there had been 77% damage to the reactor vessel. All in all, that does not spell good. But what needs to be done now? No one is actually saying, do we need to take a hardline approach here and do a Chernobyl and come up with the whole stone coffin approach, which is where you pile huge quantities of cement and steel on and lock it in, or do you try and actually get inside there, if we can, and see hands-on to what extent there is damage and what can actually be fixed? The government seems to be dithering, it seems to be dallying, and, you know, the latest idea they've got is covering all 4 of the troublesome reactors with a big cape of sorts and try and contain radiation that way. But experts saying capes aren't gonna, cloths aren't going to be the solution. You've got to come up with a better plan to that. And it seems that either the government has a lack of imagination, or just doesn't have enough technical expertise on to deal with this problem. But it certainly isn't reaching out enough to the international community, like the French, who were here last week, who are prepared to offer some solutions and actually move forward with it. It's just creating an awful lot of confusion and, of course, an awful lot of concern.
That was one of the questions I wanted to ask, is who's really helping them at this point? It's a global issue. It's becoming, as you see, the drift of some of the radioactivity that's going on in Japan. And is it a matter of Japan asking for help, or is it a matter of the international community saying, you can't handle it alone, you need help, and we're going to give it to you whether you like it or not?
It's going to come to that crunch point, certainly, and, you know, we saw that over the weekend the US military actually sent in an advanced team of 15 Marines who were specialised in radiological, nuclear and chemical and biohazard scenarios, and they are part of a 155-man team who eventually will be on the ground in the next few days to take a closer look. But they're here, they're ready to assist and advise, but they haven't had that request from the Japanese. And so at some point, depending on how much this escalate, and the indications are it will just continue to escalate, it certainly isn't getting any better, someone is going to have to step in, and of course that will cause a huge diplomatic row. But ultimately, when things get to such a level that it looks like there's going to be a major catastrophe, and when I see major, I mean, you know, for example, the evacuation of perhaps millions of people from Tokyo, which is just a couple of 100 miles down the coast, that scale of catastrophe, then someone's going to have to take charge, because no one appears to have the lead. The government doesn't seem to have the lead, and TEPCO, the utility, neither appears to have the lead. I'll give you a classic example. Look, at the weekend we discovered the first quantified leak of radioactive water from a maintenance pit directly into the ocean. They sent someone in there to try and block it up with, get this, it was shredded newspaper and sawdust. Yes, they also did try and apply a polymer which can absorb water up to 50 times the powder's volume, but that didn't do anything. And so they don't know quite what to do next. They haven't got any other solutions, so they're going to have a think about it overnight, and they'll have another go again in the morning. But, you know, shredded newspaper and sawdust really isn't the answer to, you know, a serious leak of radioaction into the Pacific Ocean.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Dominic Di Natale, live in Japan with the latest on the recovery and trying to keep the Fukushima plants under wraps. Thank you very much.